Hi there. Welcome to another episode of Slowing Down with the Scriptures. I'm Chris Matley. Thanks for joining me. Also joining me is a very special guest, my lovely daughter,
Katie.
That's right. And Katie and I, we did something really fun tonight. What did we do?
We went sailing.
We went sailing on a boat. It was amazing, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
We had a really good time. And I thought in honor of that special event, us going sailing together for the first time, we would talk about a story where Jesus and his friends went out on the water in a boat. And what happened? You want to read this story together?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. This comes from the Gospel of Mark. This is Mark chapter 4. It says, "That day, when evening came, he said to his disciples,
'Let us go over to the other side.'
Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. Now a furious squall came up." That's a kind of a storm, a really big storm. "And the waves broke over the top of the boat so that it was nearly swamped, so the boat's filling with water. And Jesus was in the stern," that's the back of the boat, right? "Sleeping on a cushion." Sounds pretty comfortable. "The disciples woke him and said to him, 'Teacher, don't you care if we drowned?' He got up, he rebuked the wind and said to the waves,"
Quiet, be still.
That's right. Pretty tough talk, huh? "Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples,"
Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?
Yep. "They were terrified, and they asked each other, 'Who is this? Who's this man? Even the wind and the waves, they obey him.'" So this is a really great story. And like all stories with Jesus in them, it has a great ending. I love a good story that has a great ending, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
What can we learn from this story? So I think there's a couple of things that happen here. If you look at the story itself, Jesus has 4 speaking parts. Those are the parts you read, right? The first is that he said, "Let us go over to the other side." Remember? It was Jesus' idea to cross over. It was his idea. Do you think he was surprised when the storm came?
No.
No? Me neither. I don't think Jesus was surprised by anything. I think he knew the storm was coming, right? And I think that tells us that Jesus has a plan. Sometimes, for us, a storm comes along in our lives, and it's easy for us to think, to look at that storm and say, what's happening? What's happening right now? God, didn't you see this coming? Of course he did. Of course he did. And he has a plan for that. He does, doesn't he? And second, he spoke to the wind and the waves. What did he say to the wind and waves?
Quiet and be still.
Right. He didn't leave anything out. So 2 problems, the wind and the waves, right? And he spoke to both of those things. He said, quiet to the wind, be still to the waves. He didn't forget a single detail. He didn't solve part of the problem, right? He solved the whole problem. When Jesus does something, he doesn't do it halfway, does he? And third, he asks a question. This is the first of 2 questions. What was the question?
Why are you so afraid?
Why are you so afraid? It sounds like he's kind of chastising his friends a little bit. Well, let's think about, why did he ask them, why are you so afraid? That seems like an obvious question. Of course, it's the storm, right? See, the thing is the Sea of Galilee, I went there. Remember last year when I went to Israel and I went there with Papa? I went to the Sea of Galilee and I stood there. And the Sea of Galilee it's actually just a big lake. It's not really a sea at all. It's a big lake, and it's long and narrow. It's kind of in a valley. There's hills along one side, and the wind blows across it. And it's actually fairly well known that storms or squalls will kick up sometimes, just violent storms. The wind blows all over the place, and if you're on a boat, you would toss and turn. And the Jewish people at the time were a landlocked people. These were not seafaring people, and so they were terrified of these storms. And in fact, some of the archaeology from the region at the time tells us that they had deep superstitions about the water. A lot of them were afraid to go on the water because they believed that there were terrible monsters that lived under the waves. It sounds kind of silly to us now, but the reality is they had all kinds of fears. And I think sometimes it's like that for us too. There's things that we're afraid of, and then there's the things that we're really afraid of. And Jesus here, he's giving them a call to action. He's asking them to identify the root causes of their fears. He's saying, what is it that you were afraid of, right? Because, like right now, there's a lot of fear. There's this there's a whole virus thing going on, the COVID-19, right? And, if you ask them, what are you afraid of right now? They might say, well, there's a virus. But what are you really afraid of? Well, I'm afraid that I might lose my job, or, what are you really afraid of? Well, I'm afraid I might not be able to provide for my family. And if you ask again, what are you really afraid of? You might hear an answer like, I'm afraid that I'm going to fail. And you start to hear people's real fears come out. And I think that's what Jesus is trying to get them to do, is to identify not just the natural causes of their fears, but the real root base cause of their fear. And then he asks them this follow-up question, number 4, which is,
Do you still have no faith?
Do you still have no faith? The reality is that this isn't a criticism. The Greek word for faith, the word that Jesus used here, is a word that is, it's pistos, which means to be persuaded, to be convinced of something, right? So he's asking them, are you not persuaded? In other words, haven't you seen me do amazing things? He's healed people, right? He's turned water into wine. He's multiplied bread into thousands of loaves of bread. He's done amazing things, and yet they were still afraid. And he asks them, are you not yet persuaded that I am exactly who I say I am? That I have power over even these natural events? I think what he wants to do is he wants to remind us that our hope comes from outside of ourselves, right? Although we are surrounded by natural events and real consequences to our choices, and real and sometimes scary circumstances, there are reasons to be afraid. But we serve a God who exists outside of those things. He's a supernatural being. He's not beholden to natural causes. In fact, he's over those things. That means he's in control of all circumstances at all times. And that should bring really great comfort to us, right? So let's look for opportunities to not simply escape from our circumstances, but to transcend them. That means to come up and over them as we embrace the source of supernatural peace in our lives, which is Jesus, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thanks for helping me out with this one. Thanks for being here. Yeah. All right. We love you guys. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks.